children of the Verith were dying in sequence. That was the word their lead physician used when she met me at the docking collar. Sequence. Not randomly, not in clusters of the already sick, but one after another in a biological chain, each death triggering the next like a domino's topple no one could reach in time to stop. She was pale amber, as all Verith are, with large dark irised eyes that had not slept in what I guessed was several station cycles. And she said it, the way a person says a thing they have already said 40 times to 40 different faces that offered nothing. She said, "We call it cascade syndrome. We do not know what to call it after that." I was the fourth specialist the Galactic Medical Accord had sent to Sereth Kellen Station. The first three had filed identical reports. Genetically novel, no known analog, no recommended protocol. Condolences attached. I read those reports on the transport in. I read them the way you read something you hope will be wrong. She walked me through the ward without speaking. 43 beds, most of them small. The Verith children who were progressing had a particular stillness. Not sleep, not unconsciousness, but the body withdrawing its resource inward the way a ship seals its compartments when the hull is breached. Their genomic repair cascade had inverted. Instead of correcting transcription errors on replication, the mechanism was amplifying them, each copy worse than the last, the errors compounding through every cell division until the tissues stopped holding their shape. It was methodical, and it was merciless, and standing at the foot of one of those beds, watching that small chest rise and fall with the particular shallow rhythm of a system running down, I felt something unlock at the back of my memory. I had seen this shape before. Not this species, not this exact mechanism, but the geometry of it, the cascade structure, the inversion, pounding error rate. I had seen it described in a paper, an old paper, a very old paper, from a database most working xenobiologists don't bother to access because it predates the Accord entirely, and its indexing is archaic, and half entries are in languages that require a secondary translation layer to parse. The Earth Pediatric Genetic Loss Registry, established 2091, continuously updated through 2289. I asked the Verith physician if I could use a terminal. She looked at me the way the others had looked at me, which was to say, with the careful blankness of someone who no longer believes help is coming, but has not yet permitted themselves to stop asking for. She gestured to the station's medical center 2 corridors down and said she would have someone show me the way. Nobody showed me. I found it myself. The registry is not, in the formal sense, a medical database. It was never intended to be. It began as a memorial archive. A project proposed by a coalition of Earth families who had lost children to rare pediatric genetic disorders and wanted those deaths to mean something beyond the grief of the people left behind. The logic was simple and devastating. If their children were going to die of something, the least the living could do was make sure that death taught the species something. Every case, logged, every autopsy, filed, every failed treatment, documented alongside what it failed to do and what it managed to slow. Every successful intervention, no matter how partial, mapped at the molecular level and cross-indexed against the patient's full genomic sequence. 207 years of that. 6,011 case studies. 19 distinct disorder variants. Dosage protocols developed through clinical iteration over generations. Refined by researchers who were sometimes the same parents who had filed the original memorial entries, grown old in the work, unwilling to stop. I opened the comparative genomics suite and I pulled the Verith cascade profile from the station's diagnostic files, and I ran the structural alignment against the registry's index disorder classes. The match came back in 11 seconds. I ran it again. Different parameters, wider tolerance band. In case the first result was an artifact of the alignment algorithm, reading similarity, where there was only surface resemblance. The second match came back in 9 seconds, and the confidence was higher. I pulled the third Accord specialist report back up, the one who had noted no known analog, and looked at which databases he had queried. He had queried 12. The registry was not among them. I could not tell whether that was ignorance or professional habit, or simply the fact that a 3-year-old Earth Memorial Archive for rare pediatric disorders does not appear in the top results when you search for xenobiological therapeutic references. It appears when you already know it exists and know why it was built. Shh. I had known because my grandmother had worked on the indexing project for 11 years. That is the only reason I had known. Vereth cascade syndrome was, at the mechanistic level, a close structural cousin to a disorder humans called Reitman-Ossi syndrome, a rare pediatric, genetic condition that had killed approximately one human child in every 40,000 births for most of the 22nd century, till a team of human researchers in 2194 developed a targeted suppression protocol that reduced the fatality rate to near zero within a decade of deployment. The protocol was in the registry. The dosage maps were in the registry. The 3 failed approaches that preceded the successful one were in the registry, each annotated with why it had failed, so that no one would waste time failing in the same direction twice. I sat back from the terminal. Then I stood up because sitting felt wrong, and I walked back to the ward. And I found the Vereth physician at child's bedside doing the quiet arithmetic of someone calculating how many hours remain. I said, "I need to show you something." She followed me without a word. I showed her the alignment. I showed her the match confidence. It was 94.7% at the cascade inversion architecture level. Not identical, not a perfect copy, but close enough that the same class of suppression approach should work. Modifications for Vereth cellular biology that her own team was better positioned to calculate than I was. I showed her the 2194 protocol, showed her the dosage maps for all 19 variants, because I did not know which variant the children in her ward were carrying, and I was not going to make her ask twice. She did not for a long time. Then she said very quietly, in her own language, and my translation unit gave me the approximate rendering. Something like, "How does Earth have this?" I told her the truth. I said, "Our children died of it. Not this exact thing. Our own version of it, our own genetic cascade inversion, own compounding error in replication. And when they died, the families filed the cases. And when the cases were filed, the researchers followed. And when the researchers found an answer, they filed that too. And they kept filing, and kept updating, and kept refusing to close the archive. Because the logic was, we do not know what will need this someday. We do not know which species will come to us with something that looks like what we have already learned to survive. So we keep the record open. We have been keeping it open for 600 years. She turned away from the terminal. She stood facing the ward's observation window, where the row of small beds was visible behind the glass, the shallow rhythms of those small chests still rising and falling. I gave her the archive transfer codes, the entire registry, not just the Reitman-Ossi section. All of it, every disorder class, every century of accumulated human pediatric grief made useful, made permanent, made available to whoever needed it, in whatever form they needed it. She took the codes. She did not look at me when she took them. I thought she was going to say something formal, some expression of gratitude in the diplomatic register, the kind of language the Accord had trained both our species to produce in moments like this. But she didn't. She stood at that window for a long time, and then she put one hand flat against the glass, and she did not speak at all. I did not require her to. I filed my report from the transport on the way back out. Standard Accord format, 1-paragraph summary, findings and recommendations attached. I listed the registry as the primary clinical resource. I noted the structural match. I noted that the treatment pathway was documented, peer-reviewed, and had demonstrated efficacy over a 2-century human clinical history. Then I sat in the quiet of the transport bay and watched Sereth Kellen fall behind me, and I thought about the families who had started that archive, the ones who had lost their children and, instead of only grieving, had sat down at whatever passed for a terminal in 2091 and begun to write down exactly what had happened and exactly why, because they believed someone would need to know. They were right. They were right about something that would not prove itself for 600 years. In a species they never imagined, children they would never meet. That is what we sent. Not a fleet, not a team. Not a war asset or a diplomatic gesture or a charitable allocation from some bureau's budget. We sent the grief we had been thorough enough to keep.